Ron.
Hi, it's Elry here with J-Tech, and tonight we're going to be talking a little bit about a manual transmission. In front of me, I got a cutaway of a 5-speed transmission. Generally, transmission is going to have 4 shafts. You're going to have your input, your main shaft, your output shaft, and at the bottom, your counter shaft or lay shaft. Power always comes in from your engine into your input, goes down to your counter shaft. Depending on what gear you're in, it'll stop at that gear and go up here to your main shaft and out your output. So your main shaft is the shaft that houses your gears. On this particular one here, we got first gear, which is always your biggest gear on the main shaft, which is usually your torque gear to get you started from a stop position. We got second gear, third gear, fourth gear, which is usually your direct drive on a 5-speed transmission or your 1-to-1 ratio. And in the back here, we got fifth, which is usually your smallest gear on your output shaft or your overdrive gear. A little bit on power flow. We got, in order to obtain power flow through the manual transmission, we use shift rails and shift forks to engage the gears. So if I can't really tell you what type of lever this is because this is a cutaway, but using manually, if I shift this fork back into first gear, we'll have power going to the input, down your counter shaft, into your small gear here, which is your which is going to drive your big gear here, and that'll give you first gear. That'll give you your high torque, low speed gear. Go back in the neutral, free spinning, shift in the second. Once again, we're gonna have power coming in from the input, down at the counter, going into the gear here, up into my big gear, my bigger gear on the main shaft, and out the output. Real quick, most of your transmissions on the 5-speed anyway, you're gonna have your shift forks will usually be for 2 gears. You have your first and second gear on one shift fork, and your third and fourth on another one, and then you have your fifth and reverse on the shift fork in the back here. So that's that, and then if you didn't have your input gear, your input shaft here, you won't be able to get any work, or no gears will be able to be engaged. You won't be able to get any power flow through your transmission. So the input shaft is very important. It's connected to the engine, it's driven by the engine, and it's where the power always starts in any transmission, whether manual or automatic. Back here, we got fifth and reverse. Fifth gear is your small gear up here, and your big gear down here. This is your overdrive gear. This would be your lowest gear reduction, usually 0.87 to 1. It has its own separate fork and rail back here. Back here, engage it. Fifth gear. And reverse uses a series of 3 gears in series. You have your idler gear, your reverse gear here, and this is actually your driven gear. When you're in reverse, it switches. So if I was to here, go on the reverse. Going to reverse here. If my input shaft is spinning clockwise, my output shaft is going to spin the same way because I'm using the idler gear to change the change the direction. And also the difference in gears, if you notice, my first, second, and third and fourth gear are helical or bevel gears, and that makes for a quiet, smooth engagement when you're actually in the gear, noise-wise. But my reverse gear back here is what you call a spur, and it's usually more noisier, and that's why when you're in reverse, you get that kind of whining or howling noise. And on the shafts, we got a series of bearings that accommodate loads, whether they be radial, up and down. Radial load is generally when your gear is meshed, it will have a tendency to try to pull apart. The shaft will try to pull apart from each other, and these bearings up here, they compensate for that, and they hold the shafts together, and they're built to take a lot of pressure. You also have thrust bearings, which you can't see on here, but they are for the torque loads or your lateral loads, and they're built to take a beating as well. So that's just a little bit about the transmission, you know. Hope that helped. Until next time.